All right, back in the lab. This feels so good. And why? Why does it feel good? Well, it feels good because we're going to be talking about fantasy football. I'm sitting here with my co-host, Corey.
Good to be with you, Mark.
And that's it. My name is Mark. Why are we doing this? Why another fantasy football podcast? Isn't there like a million ways to skin a cat here? Sure. Problem is, they haven't heard our perspective yet. And that's really what it comes down to. Whether you like it or not, everyone's got a perspective. And fantasy analysts like Matthew Berry and the guys at Roto World, they're not always right? And even if they are right 70% of the time more than we are, it doesn't matter because we have a different perspective and that should be valued. And if you don't value it, no worries. Because, this isn't just for you, it's for the next person, and it's for us, and blah, 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 blah. Bottom line, we're here to deliver fantasy football news. We're going to be talking about players, teams, coaches, matchups, rankings. We're going to be doing this on a weekly basis. You need to know this will be consistent. You can throw this on your car ride to work on a Wednesday, get what you need to get in a manageable, consumable way, and have what you need for the weekend's games. And then you can go throw on the other 12 podcasts you have. Breaking it down, we're going to start with the NFC West. The NFC West is a very interesting division. We're going to set our focus on that because it's a polarizing division. You got the Rams, you got the Seahawks, you got the Cardinals, and you got
49ers.
So 49ers, and it's polarizing because the Rams have won the division a couple years in a row now, but you got teams like the Cardinals who I'm up on. But I'm going to let you start with the Rams and let you start with a big topic at hand. In the Rams running back situation.
Yeah, so one of the big things I'm tracking in the offseason is the status of Todd Gurley's injury. I think that's something that's being talked about as a potential influencer for how that offense will function. But I think one thing that's not being recognized necessarily as much is how well the offense, how well Sean McVay's play action style may have affected running lanes for Todd Gurley as well. So I think that the offense will serve pretty well, but I also think that we should be looking at Cooper Kupp because that is primary target for Jared Goff. Jared Goff has flashed some really great games, but he has shown inconsistency at times as well. So without a Cooper Kupp or a limited Cooper Kupp, I think that the Rams could potentially have a down season.
Yeah, I mean, with Cooper Kupp, obviously that's a big deal. You'd watch the Rams last year, Thursday night game, and you'd see that dude running across the field, and every time he seemed to catch the ball, it'd be a first down. Just the epitome of a safety net, right? And Goff looked better. He took the next step. Kupp looks great. Robert Woods, I mean, we all knew he was a pretty good player, but he was like a true DraftKings legend last year, kind of guy who could win you $1 million in a week because he'd throw up two random 70-yard touchdown burgers out of nowhere. Brandon Cooks, elite. So yeah, great running receiver core, but the running backs, you pick up Henderson now, the whole Gurley dilemma. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think Henderson at least. Once the season is underway, week 4, week 5, week 6, I think he could be a very apt fill-in for Gurley. I mean, he doesn't have the upside, but they obviously really liked what he did coming out of Memphis, setting the record for yards per carry. He does have upside. He is going to be a factor, but it's up to us to kind of figure out how much of a factor, what role would he have, how's that going to affect this team and the offense.
Yeah, and it's like the whole Gurley thing is reminiscent of a time when you and I were talking about AP back in the day. AP, Adrian Peterson, just an absolute freak of nature. And really when it comes down to with this injury is, will he be ready this year? Most of you guys are in redraft leagues. So you're going to have to decide, do I want to go grab Todd in late first round, middle second round? Where's he going? Will the person who drafts him be very happy because they got Todd Gurley at 15 or 20? And that's a strong possibility. Or is it going to be is the smart play, the smart money, the shark money, going to be the guy who gets Henderson in the 4th or 5th? And really, I don't know that answer. But I remember when we used to talk about AP, especially when it came after that ACL injury, we had a discussion once that kind of rings bells in my mind. I was heavy AP. He was coming off the ACL. I think it was 4 months recovery time, unprecedented. And I'm like, Corey, this guy's a freak. He's not normal. He is going to recover, and he's going to be ready this season. He just ran a 4.340. And I believe you said something about the 40 not mattering, ACL injury, that type of thing. And Corey's smiling over here. And, what it comes down to is I was like, listen, man, it's AP. He's back. He says he's going to play. He's back. And then you kind of came with the now infamous sayings like, Mark, his knee is not attached to his leg. He had an ACL. He's not attached to his leg. And I just simply, went with my gut, and it did pay off that year. But many times it's gone the other way. And the guy who is sitting there in your office right now, slamming waters by the water cooler, telling you go Gurley, invest in Gurley early, that guy could lead you astray.
Early Gurley. Yeah, so I probably take a little bit more analytical approach. I feel like early on in the draft, what I'm looking to do is mitigate risk, get the safest option I possibly can, because we've all had those first-round busts, and it can completely derail an entire season. So while you may be right, and Gurley may be NFC Offensive Player of the Year again this year, that's just not an investment I'm looking to make, and I'd probably be on the side of grabbing a Darrell Henderson much later.
And I do think that's the smart play, just full disclosure. I wouldn't invest my first round pick in Todd Gurley. You look at the quarterback depth this year. There's a ton of it. You look at, running backs going in the first round, then the likes of the names that would be around a Gurley. I'd rather just have another guy who I know is ready to roll and is going to put up good production. Now, yes, Gurley could come out and week 2 have a 3-touchdown game, and everyone's going to be like, should have just went with Gurley because he's an absolute monster in his own right. But yeah, Henderson, I think, is where the smart money goes. And, looking at the Rams office in general, I think other teams in the NFC have bolstered their defenses and are going to give the Rams some fits. How do you feel about that? Do you genuinely think they're at risk of not winning the division this year?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think that the Super Bowl loser hangover is a real thing. That's just an emotional and psychological hurdle for a team to overcome. That's a long playoff run that limits the amount of rest the team had in the offseason. And we've seen it time after time with Super Bowl losing teams having disappointing years the next season. I think that that's entirely possible, and I'm also very bullish on Russell Wilson. I think that the Seahawks invested in their passing game. They brought in receivers like DK Metcalf to change that offense, and it's going to come down to, will they unleash Russell Wilson? He did have the least pass attempts in his career last season, which doesn't make sense because they just re-signed him to a $100 million contract. They brought in multiple receivers. So I think there could be a mind shift there, and it could result in the Seahawks being the NFC West champs.
And that could possibly happen. Or it's just one of them preseason smokescreen type deals where, the Seahawks, lead the league in rushing last year? They can run the freaking rock, right? So, bringing in those guys, like a DK Metcalf, who is just, that's an exciting prospect to take a look at. Is that just a situation where it's not like, hey, we're going to open it up for the play action and we're going to get this guy some more looks? Or they're just going to keep doing what they do and pound the ball, and Russ's few pass attempts will be enough because they will be successful pass attempts. He's just efficient, and I think he's always an interesting guy to look at as a quarterback. But would I pick him over Goff with the 3 weapons they have and the talent at running back? I don't think so. I think I go Goffy. And really, surprise, surprise, I'm going out on a limb here and saying I wouldn't even take those 2 guys at quarterback if I had to pick from the litter in the NFC West. And I think you might know where I'm going with this. And if you're thinking it's Jimmy Garoppolo, you're wrong. It's not. It is not. I'm going to say it right now. Murray is going to dominate. And from a fantasy perspective, he's going to dominate. He's this year's Patty Mahomes. You got Kyle Kingsbury coming in. We know the air raid offense experiment has failed before, but I think they're going to come in here. They're going to have some RPO hybrid, sabermetric MIT offense where no one knows what the hell's going on. There's a ton of misdirection. There's a lot of gadget players on that Arizona offense. You bring in a Danny Isabella. These guys aren't getting the respect they deserve preseason, I believe. I think their 3-13 record doesn't lend them a hand in that. And then I also think, you just have a lot of good teams in the division. So naturally, people are like, okay, put the red Kool-Aid down. everyone in Arizona's loving me right now, right? But it's like, no, they're not going to do jack shit this year. It's going to be a Rams division, or it's going to be a Seahawks division, or some people are saying the Niners.
Yeah, I mean, a popular pick to have a better season this year has been the Cardinals. And it's easy to see why. Brought in a new coach. They brought in a dynamic quarterback. They're investing in that offense with Andy Isabella. They also grabbed Hakeem Butler. It was thought by some to be like a Calvin Johnson type prospect, but he slipped to the 4th round. So he can develop behind, the veteran Larry Fitzgerald there and probably contribute down the line. I do think the Cardinals win more than 3 games this year, but I do think there's some growing pains as Kingsbury implements his offense, as Murray adapts to the NFL style. And we'll see if he can stay healthy. That's my biggest concern. I have no doubts about Kyler Murray's talent, but I do have doubts about whether he has that innate skill that Russell Wilson does to evade and stay clean in the pocket, because he has the athleticism, but can he feel the pass rush? Can he stay upright? Can he avoid injury? I think that's the biggest concern for me.
Well, I think you're spot on everything you just said. A couple interesting things that just came into my head. First and foremost, Kingsbury did say, if I had the number 1 pick in the draft, I'd pick Kyler Murray, which I think is just, talk about living in the simulation. Like, this guy's just like playing Madden. He's just like, yeah, if I had the first pick, though, I would pick Murray. Next year, he's in the position to pick Murray with the first pick, which, again, sometimes worlds collide like that. That's wild. But he does live up to what he said, and he picks Murray, and we'll see where that goes. I think it's his dream kind of, guy to have, is the secret weapon, if you will. Back to Hakeem Butler. This guy's really interesting, and the Calvin Johnson comps are real. He actually is working with Calvin Johnson right now, and from what I read, he's been rooming with Murray, and they've got an amazing bond. Murray has been saying, I can throw it up into a certain region, and literally this guy will bring it down. And, people need to get away from the 4th round crap. You have to understand, like, it's not about what round you get drafted in. It's what you do when you're on the field. And if this guy's a freak and he's got great hands and he can get up and he's a product of a really interesting offense that gets him, a lot of one-on-ones, then, hey, look into him. Look into him. No one's giving him any love. I know Madden's not going to give him any love. The rating won't be there.
Yeah, well, I think now's your opportunity to buy low on that offense. I don't think it's necessarily, my opinion, going to be something that skyrockets right away. But I think that if you look at the next 2, 3, 4 years, if you're in a dynasty league, that's somewhere you want to invest. If you're in more like a redraft format, I think there could be some ups and downs.
Yeah, it's a la the Chiefs last year. When there were guys sniping people on the Chiefs last year, I'm like, okay, all right, Patty Mahomes, it's like, will he be able to be that guy this year? I just never was a buyer. And it bit me. It came up and bit me. And the people that do take that risk this year in redrafts will be handsomely rewarded if it comes to fruition. Now, if it doesn't, or it takes too long, or it's a hodgepodge of Isabella and Butler and Fitz is always going to eat, it's Larry Fitz, David Johnson, they've got some guys like Chase Edmonds who's looking to steal some tutties. There's just, it's going to be complicated. Now, they did improve the O-line. They got J.R. Sweezy from Seattle, which I think is a big get. And then also they got the guy from Cleveland. He was a starting tackle. The name is evading me right now, but he is actually childhood friends with T.J. Logan, one of their running backs on the squad. So you got a little bond coming in. Kingsbury has already said that this guy, I think it's Dwayne Henderson. I'm totally making that shit up if that's not true. But he's already said he looks like a good tackle for us. So if you shored up part of the line there, and that's important.
Yeah, I mean, they had nowhere to go but up in that regard. It was brutal watching, any quarterback they had behind center last year try to stay upright. It was clearly something they needed to improve in the offseason. I think they did make some changes that will make it better. But I also don't think this is going to be a top 15 or 16 line this year either. So you throw a rookie quarterback behind that line, although it's improved, it's not elite. And furthermore, a rookie quarterback who's 5'11", that could create challenges. And I think that as we look at that offense and where should we invest, I think that Kyler Murray has the huge upside, but I also think that you could get burned with some injuries or with some really down games as he sort of acclimates.
And you're starting to maybe pick up on the dynamic a bit here. The more analytical, thoughtful approach might be coming from my colleague here, where the gut feel, sleeper, Kool-Aid type stuff is coming from my side, and that can get me burned sometimes, and it can win me leagues others. I think Murray fits in well with the shitty line. Because let's be honest, he's good at evading, he's good at throwing on the run, he's got elite deep arm pass accuracy. So bottom line is even if they don't hold up, or maybe they're a middle of the road offensive line, he can still find a way to work within that. You bring in the gadget guys, quick throws, Kingsbury at the helm. I believe in this guy. He's got that Sean McVay aura to him where he just is I'm confident. I'm not cocky. I'm confident. And I love that shit. It's a shame he's in the NFC West because it is a brutal division.
Yeah, well, we're here in Chicago, so we're Bears fans. We watched the Matt Nagy experiment last year of the dynamic yet young and fairly unknown offensive coordinator coming into a team, taking a different approach and having the offense go from bottom of the league, I want to say 29th. I think they, jumped up to somewhere in the teens. So just Nagy in and of himself, he probably was not perfect as a game manager, doing those sorts of things for the first time at the NFL level. There were mistakes made, so I anticipate something similar from Kingsbury. He's going to bring some dynamic concepts. He's going to improve that offense. There will be numbers put up there, but he's probably going to have a learning curve for how to manage a game, when to use timeouts, and just how to workflow, just being on the sidelines at the NFL level.
Yeah, and ultimately all those things do tie into fantasy. Whether we want to pretend like they don't or they don't make as much of an impact as one would think, it does matter. And it could mean the difference between X amount of possessions or Y amount of possessions just based off timeouts used and time, and plays called. Play calling is a big part of what can make a fantasy prospect prosper. If opportunity is there, that's really what it bakes down and boils down to. It's opportunity. Is the guy going to get his touches? Is the team going to be in a position to utilize that guy? We've all had that guy who should have, 20 touches a game, but ends up getting 15 every game because his team sucks. Or the reverse, it's a Patriot and there's too much to go around. and it just becomes a, hey, is it going to be my week type of thing?
Yeah. And you mentioned the Chiefs earlier. I think that was a perfect storm that's unlikely to be repeated. I know I did go ahead and get myself some Mahomes shares. I actually pulled off a trade in Dynasty. I had Julio Jones, and I traded him for Pat Mahomes and a first-round pick. So that ended up paying off. He was the number one quarterback, but that was a perfect storm. The reason I ended up doing that was, number one, is Julio getting towards the back nine of his career? Yes. Is he still elite right now? Sure. But I'd rather sell a little too early than a little too late, especially in Dynasty. Then also looking at the Chiefs in the offseason, I looked at their receivers with Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins and just some of the depth they have there. Travis Kelce. There's just so many weapons. And the biggest factor I think that isn't discussed enough is, in fantasy especially, when you have a dynamic offense with a team that has a bad defense, that's going to portend itself to shootouts every single week. So that's one of the things that drove me to invest in the Chiefs last year. So that's one of the things I always keep my eyes out for is where can we find a dynamic offense that has a lacking defense that's going to be in those high scoring games week after week.
Definitely weary about the whole Hill situation, but that's a whole nother conversation. Fantastic point, though, because I was in the same kind of line of thinking with Deshaun Watson and the Texans, just believing in these 45, 42, Thursday night shootouts where you're just Watson, you're going to throw 3 picks at half, but I can pretty much bank you're going to get me 20 to 25 points in the second half just with your wheels and your crazy, deep throws that can turn into Hopkins touchdowns in an instant. So I'm all about that. And that's really what it comes down to. When you're building your fantasy team, you have to have a healthy dose of real life NFL analysis and fantasy analysis. It's you're not going to survive picking all Pats players. On the other side of it, you have to understand that sometimes the guy on the shitty team who just gets a lot of touches is going to be your best bet, even if he isn't the sexy name. The guys that come to my mind are those Ravens running backs every year. I always skip them. I want nothing to do with them. But I end up losing in week 8 to some dude who has what Buck Allen, and I'm just like, dude, Buck Allen threw up a 19 on me today? Like, really? And it's like, so you always got to look at it season-long viewpoint, but then on a week-to-week basis, a Buck Allen might be your guy in week 9. So with that said, kind of, went on the little Arizona, train out to Phoenix for that one. And I get that there aren't going to be a lot of buyers given how tough that division will be, given some of the missteps that rookie coaches can take.
Do you think they're going to win the division?
I definitely think people can't put it past the realm of possibilities. They're at 30-1 right now to win the division. If you have some cojones and you want to throw down, a $20 bet, or you want to just bet with your fantasy players and say, I'm going to get Kyler Murray, I'm going to get Hakeem Butler, I don't care if I have to reach, or I'm going to get Isabella. I think he's going to be that fast slot 80 catch guy, and out of nowhere. Again, like, what's the risk? What's the opportunity cost of taking Isabella in the whatever round, way deep in there, versus Chris Hogan? Like, yeah, Chris Hogan, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get 4 weeks where he's injured with a sprained ankle, and then you're going to get 15-point games. I'm going upside this year. I had a rough couple years. I'm going strictly upside. And the reason I didn't play as well the last couple of years is because I got away from my strategy, which is like I need to go for those guys that are game winners or league winners, guys that make a huge impact. And I got away from it. I didn't believe in the Mahomes last year. I wasn't on that train. And look where it got me. It's not a perfect science.
Yeah, and I think there's a fine line between high upside and low risk. So it depends where you're drafting. So, in the first 3 rounds, I like to look as safe as possible, established players that aren't too old, who produce similar numbers year after year, that become some kind of predictable asset, right? And then after that, I'm looking for upside. So in the middle rounds, I want to find rookie running backs like Rashad Penny, like Miles Sanders, guys who haven't necessarily flashed, but it's only going to take but 1 week, even in preseason, for a Miles Sanders 60-yard touchdown and for his draft stock to skyrocket. So I'm looking for those guys who maybe aren't necessarily quote-unquote sleepers right now, but their stock is lower than it should be, and if I can get them at value, it wouldn't take long for them to have one big game, and then now all of a sudden that's an asset that everybody in the league wants. I could trade them. I could deploy them each week. So I'm looking for those buy low opportunities.
Yeah, that's a great point. You want to have fun with it. You want to go high risk, high reward. But truly, if you can get that high risk down to medium risk or even low risk and still benefit from that potential high reward, that's really the sweet spot you're looking for.
Yeah. Well, the one team we haven't talked about yet is the San Francisco 49ers. You got Jimmy G coming back.
Eastern Illinois.
You got an interesting team there. So what are your thoughts?
Bottom line, there are people picking them to win the division. And Vegas seems to think they're in line with the Seahawks in terms of opportunity to win the division. What a funny thing I noticed was the Niners have better odds to win the division than they do to win the NFC when being compared to the Seahawks. So you like the Seahawks to win the NFC? It's like 18-1, I think. I totally fucked that up. The Niners and the Seahawks have a similar opportunity to win the NFC at 18-1. But in winning the division, I'm pretty sure the odds for the Seahawks are like 14-5 and 7-1 for the Niners. So a lot of people seem to think like, oh, okay, it's a coin flip. Yeah, Jimmy G could have that breakout year, get buck with it, and just make things happen. And then there's other people that are like, yeah, I can see them being just a team that competes in the NFC West. I don't think they're going to be better than the Seahawks or the Rams. I don't know where I stand on that, just from a high-level perspective. In terms of fantasy, there are some things to be interested in. And it starts with their running back core. It's a bit messy. It's a bit messy, but if you can pick that horse that you think is going to lead the pack, you can end up having one of those low-risk type of guys that not a lot of people invest in and end up being a good guy. Like Breida, yeah. I wanted Breida at the end of last year before he gets hurt. I wanted some of that,
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but it's like, I'll take him, especially in a deep league.
Yeah, it's a messy backfield. At one point last year, they were rolling out Raheem Mostert.
Who's actually kind of sneaky. He's actually kind of sneaky.
It's a team that's had a ton of injuries. over the Kyle Shanahan era. And I don't think we really know what to make of that team yet. We've seen Jimmy Garoppolo succeed, but we haven't seen him play very long. We've seen some investment into that offense with bringing in Deebo Samuel. They had Dante Pettis last year who flashed a little bit, but neither of these guys are really jumping off the page at me. This doesn't say dynamic offense to me, and it makes me think Kyle Shanahan might be a little bit limited by the resources he's being given by general manager John Lynch. I don't know if he's really been worth the acquisition yet. So I don't know if it's a roster with a ton of talent. I think Garoppolo is a good quarterback, but I don't think it'll be enough to be a big factor in the NFC West.
Yeah, I can't sit here and definitively say one way or the other. I am a huge fan of Kittle. I got into an argument with someone last year about Kittle. I was like, he's a top 5 tight end. And again, there's two camps of people in fantasy football. There's the people that need to see it happen first, and then there's the people that say, you know what, I've seen him in college. I know how athletic he is. I know he's got great hands. I've seen a very small sample size. That is enough. Like, that's all I need.
Marky G will roll the dice.
Yeah, and Kittle is a perfect example. A guy, you didn't need to invest in, who ends up being a top 5 tight end. I mean, he looks amazing. He's like a skinnier Gronk.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you dive into his season, it was excellent. I know I personally got scared off by his preseason injury, which I regretted. I agreed with you that on the talent and assumed that he'd have Jimmy Garoppolo the whole season. And the fact that he pulled off an excellent season with Jimmy going down and them sort of trotting out guys I had never heard of at quarterback is astounding. But I think if you dig into the numbers on Kittle specifically last year, a lot of what he did is something that I consider not repeatable. So he had a ton of catches where he ended up going 40, 50, 60 yards. I think his yards after catch were tops in the league for a tight end last year for sure, and if not, like possibly ever. So when I look at just a pure analytical perspective on George Kittle, love the talent. He's tied to a good quarterback and offensive coach. He's not going to be bad, but I think it'll be very hard for him to replicate last season.
Yeah, I mean, in the eye test, I have to sit there and say this guy is really good. I do recognize, he'd have 2 points going into the third quarter, and then all of a sudden he'd have like 14. He had a lot of those long runs, yards after catch, and I think he hurdled a couple guys too. So like he's the athleticism's there, the run after catch is there, the stiff arm is there. Like he's an interesting tight end to own. Yeah, will it be worth paying up now because people know that? No, now you go find the next guy. Now you go invest in a Vance McDonald, because...
Love Vance.
Yeah, he's got the athletic traits we're talking about in a Kittle, but, you don't have to pay for a Kittle,
Yeah, that's an example of taking a similar athlete much later, just getting that value. But going back to the running backs, they brought in Tevin Coleman, who had some success under Kyle Shanahan in Atlanta, but that's a crowded backfield. You have Matt Breida, who's athletic, a little undersized,
McKinnon.
And Jerick McKinnon should be back from his ACL injury. So athletically, Jerick McKinnon is about as good as it gets in the league. I feel like eye test for me, he doesn't seem like an every down type of back that can handle that kind of workload. He runs a little straight line. I don't know how elusive he is. He is fast, but I feel like he takes on a lot of like really powerful tackles, and that probably wouldn't hold up over a full season. So when I look at that backfield, I don't see anyone that I'm super confident in. So typically in those, I'm going to look for like the least expensive option. So if we're looking at average draft position, I think you're probably going to see Tevin Coleman being the first off the board, Matt Breida next, and then Jerick McKinnon, despite the injury and despite concerns, I feel like could be had at a real discount that could pay off some big value.
Yeah, if you want to see the nasty